The yard at Ironwood State Prison is a concrete oven under the California sun, and on this particular afternoon, the air itself seems to hold its breath. A circle has already formed. 20, maybe 30 men in orange jumpsuits stand shoulder to shoulder, arms folded, eyes hungry for whatever is about to happen. In the center, a woman in county blues kneels on the cracked ground, blood dripping from her split lip onto the dust. Her braids hang forward like dark ropes, hiding her face. Above her towers Reyes, 6'5" of prison yard legend, shirtless and inked from collarbone to wrist, veins popping like cables under his skin. His knee rises slow, deliberate, the way a guillotine blade lifts before it drops. The crowd leans in. Someone whistles low. The knee crashes down. Bone meets cheek with a sickening crack that echoes off the gun towers. The woman's head snaps back. She doesn't scream. She doesn't even grunt. She just stays there on her knees, breathing through her nose, blood pooling under her. Reyes laughs, deep and ugly, and the circle tightens. They think it's over. They think they've broken the new fish on day one. They have no idea they just struck a United States Army Ranger. They have no idea they just woke up Staff Sergeant Aaliyah, Ghost, Monroe. 3 days earlier, a gray prison bus had coughed its way through the gates, chains rattling like loose change. Aaliyah stepped off last, 5'7", maybe $140 soaking wet, wrists cuffed in front of her like it was nothing more than an inconvenience. The cuz barely looked at her. New meat. Another drug case, they figured. The paperwork said possession with intent, 10 years. Nobody bothered to read the classified addendum buried in her file, the one stamped with the seal of the Department of Defense. Nobody noticed the way her eyes tracked the guard towers, counting angles, distances, response times. Nobody saw the faint white scar that ran from her left ear down into the collar of her jumpsuit, souvenir from a night in Helmand Province when she carried 2 wounded teammates 3 kilometers through Taliban fire. To Ironwood, she was just another number. To the streets that put her away, she was leverage, a fall guy for a bigger fish who'd vanished into witness protection. To Aaliyah herself, she was exactly where she needed to be. Inside, the rules were simple: pick a side or get picked apart. Reyes ran the yard for the Aryan steel. His crew controlled the phones, the commissary hustles, the gym, everything that mattered. Word travels fast in a place like Ironwood, and word was the new black girl had no gang, no money on her books, and no fear in her eyes. That combination is blood in the water. Reyes decided to make an example before chow on her 3rd day. He sent his lieutenant, a skinhead called Brick, to deliver the message: kneel or bleed. Aaliyah looked Brick dead in the eye and said, "Tell your boyfriend I'll see him outside." The yard laughed. Brick turned red. Reyes smiled like Christmas came early. Now here they were. The knee had landed. The crowd waited for her to cry, to beg, to crawl. Instead, Aaliyah lifted her head. Slowly. Blood painted her teeth when she smiled. Reyes frowned, something flickering behind his eyes, uncertainty maybe, or the first cold drip of instinct telling him the temperature in the yard had just changed. Aaliyah spat red onto the concrete between his boots. Her voice, when it came, was quiet enough that only the front row heard it, but it carried like a blade. "You hit like a civilian." The circle went dead silent. A couple of the old-timers at the edge felt the hairs on their necks rise. They'd heard that tone before, on battlefields they never talked about. Reyes barked a laugh that didn't quite land and reached down to grab a fistful of her braids, yanking her head back. His other fist cocked. That was the exact moment the camera in Tower 3 caught something no one in the yard saw coming. Aaliyah moved. It wasn't flashy. No spinning kicks, no movie foo. Just economy of violence honed over 4 combat tours. Her cuffed hands came up inside his grip, thumbs finding the radial nerve in his wrist. His fingers opened like a busted lock. She rose in the same motion, shoulder driving into his solar plexus, lifting all 300 pounds of him clear off the ground for half a heartbeat before she pivoted and dumped him on his back. The air left his lungs in a whoosh you could hear 20 yards away. Before Brick could step in, Aaliyah's elbow was already traveling, a short, vicious arc that caught him just under the eye socket. He dropped like someone pulled the plug. 2 more came from the sides. She slipped the first punch, caught the second arm, twisted, and the man screamed as his shoulder left its home. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. 4 bodies on the ground, one of them the king. The yard didn't cheer. It didn't breathe. Every man there had seen fights, seen blood, seen men stabbed 20 times for looking wrong. They had never seen anything move like that without a weapon. Reyes was trying to get up, face purple, eyes wide with something that looked a lot like fear. Aaliyah stood over him, chest barely moving, cuffs still on her wrists, blood dripping from her chin. The alarm finally started wailing, boots pounding from every direction, cuz shouting, shotguns racking. She raised her hands slow, palms open, and locked eyes with Reyes. "I'm not here for your throne," she said, loud enough for the whole circle now. "I'm here for the man who put me in here. You stay out of my way, we won't have a problem." "You don't." She let it hang, then glanced at the 4 bodies moaning around her feet. "Well, you do the math." The cuz swarmed, rifles up, screaming at her to get on the ground. She knelt without being told twice, placing her cuffed hands on her head like she'd done it 1,000 times before. As they dragged her away, past the stunned faces, past Reyes coughing blood into the dirt, one old lifer in the back whispered to the man next to him, "That ain't no dope case. That's Delta or some shit." The rumor mill ignited before she even reached segregation. In the hole, 23 hours a day under flickering fluorescent light, Aaliyah sat on the edge of her bunk and finally let herself feel the pain. Cheek swollen, lip busted, 2 teeth loose. She pressed a cold finger to the worst of it and laughed once, soft and bitter. 6 months ago she'd been in Bragg, teaching hand-to-hand to men twice her size who called her ma'am. Now she was property of the state of California, number W98117. All because she'd trusted the wrong officer with intel that could bring down a cartel pipeline running heroin through military cargo planes. The cartel flipped the script, pinned it on her, and the army, eager to avoid scandal, let her take the fall. Quietly, no court-martial, no headlines. Just a plea deal and 10 years. They told her family she'd gone rogue. They told her team she'd died in a training accident. She let them believe it. Because the man who sold her out, Major Daniel Voss, former Special Forces, now cartel banker, was hiding behind these same walls. Life without parole for a different set of crimes, but still breathing. Still smirking. She came here to finish what the system wouldn't. Word of the yard beatdown spread faster than hepatitis. By lights out, every tier knew the new girl had put Reyes and 3 of his lieutenants in the infirmary with nothing but her hands in cuffs. The AB backed off. The Bloods sent a kite offering protection. The Nation of Islam sent an imam to ask if she needed anything read to her from the Quran. She politely declined everything. She didn't need soldiers. She needed ghosts. Weeks turned into a month. Aaliyah moved through the prison like smoke, quiet, polite, always watching. She worked laundry, folding orange jumpsuits 12 hours a day, memorizing faces, routines, which CO looked the other way for a pack of smokes, which camera had the blind spot behind the chapel. She started running the yard at dawn, 3 miles every morning, slow and steady, rebuilding the engine the army had built and prison had tried to rust. Men gave her space without being asked. Even the shot callers nodded when she passed. Reyes healed slow, ribs cracked, pride shattered. He watched her from across the yard every day, eyes burning holes, but he never came close again. Some animals learn quick. Then came the night the lights went out. It started with a power flicker, normal in a 40-year-old facility, but this one didn't come back. Emergency reds kicked in, bathing the tiers in blood-colored gloom. Alarms howled. Over the loudspeakers, a voice barked lockdown, but the cell doors never slammed. Somebody on the night shift had cut the mag locks. Within 30 seconds, shadows were moving. Knives flashed. Old scores started settling in the dark. A guard went down screaming near C block. Then the real plan revealed itself. A crew from the Mexican Mafia had paid off half the night staff to stage a blackout riot, perfect cover to shank Voss in his cell on D wing before he could testify against their shot callers on the outside. Voss, the man who'd ruined her life, was about to die for reasons that had nothing to do with her. She couldn't allow that. Not yet. Aaliyah was already moving. She'd palmed a sharpened toothbrush handle weeks ago, just in case. The red glow painted everything in hellish slow motion. She slipped out of her cell, barefoot, silent, hugging the shadows the way she once hugged the walls of compounds in Kandahar. Bodies slammed into each other in the dark, grunts and wet sounds of blades finding flesh. She flowed through it untouched, a ghost in blues. D-Wing was 3 tiers up. She took the stairs 2 at a time, vaulted the railing when a knot of fighting blocked the landing. A hand grabbed her ankle, someone trying to pull her into their war. She stomped down hard, felt cartilage collapse, kept moving. Voss's cell was at the end, door hanging open. Inside, 2 men in ski masks had him pinned face down on the bunk, one raising a jagged piece of mirror. Voss was whimpering, begging in the voice she remembered from staff meetings, the voice that once ordered her team into a kill zone he'd sold to the enemy. Time slowed to crystal. She crossed the 10 feet in 2 strides, caught the raised arm, hyperextended the elbow until it snapped like green wood. The second man spun, blade flashing. She trapped the wrist, twisted, drove him face first into the cinder block wall. He dropped and stayed down. Voss rolled over, eyes wide in the red light, recognition dawning like sunrise. Monroe, his voice cracked. You're dead. Not yet, she said. She zip-tied both attackers with strips cut from a bedsheet weeks ago, gagged them with socks. Then she hauled Voss up by his collar until they were nose to nose. You sold us out, she whispered. You sold me. My team thinks I'm a traitor. My little sister thinks I'm dead. And now you're going to fix it. He tried to laugh, but it came out a sob. You think you scare me. You're in here with me, ghost. 10 years. You're nothing. She leaned in until he could feel her breath. Daniel, I have 9 years, 364 days left on my sentence. That's a long time to make someone regret breathing. Power surged back. Fluorescent lights buzzed alive. Boots thundered closer. She dropped him, stepped back, hands raised as cuz flooded the tier with shotguns and pepper spray. They found her standing calm in the middle of 2 unconscious cartel hitters and 1 very shaken former major. The warden watched the surveillance footage himself that night, frame by frame, and when it was over he sat very still for a long time. 3 days later, Aaliyah was called to the captain's office. A man in a cheap suit she didn't recognize waited with a folder thick as a phone book. He didn't offer his name. Staff Sergeant Monroe, he began, and she almost flinched at the rank. The Department of Defense has reviewed new evidence concerning your case. He slid the folder across the desk. Inside were signed affidavits, bank records, a recorded confession from Voss made under circumstances the Army declined to specify. Her conviction was vacated effective immediately. The warden himself handed her the civilian clothes someone had overnighted, jeans, boots, a plain gray hoodie. She changed in a storage room that smelled like bleach and old mop water. At the front gate, a black Suburban idled. The driver wore the same cheap suit vibe. Before she climbed in, she turned and looked back at Ironwood one last time. Reyes stood at the fence, hands in his pockets, watching. Their eyes met across 100 yards of desert. He lifted his chin, not quite a salute, but close enough. She nodded once and got in the truck. 6 months later, a new training circular went out to every Ranger battalion, a 3-day block on close quarters combatives taught by a guest instructor no one had ever heard of. The instructor was 5'7", quiet, moved like water. She never smiled in class, but when a cocky private asked why they were learning to fight with their hands cuffed, she looked at him for a long second and said, because sometimes the mission doesn't end when they lock the door. And somewhere in a supermax in Colorado, Daniel Voss wakes up every night when the lights go out, listening for footsteps that never quite come. That's the thing about ghosts. They don't always haunt the house. Sometimes they just remind you the house is theirs. So what about you? Have you ever been counted out, written off, told you were done, only to rise up and prove every single one of them wrong? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this one hit you in the chest, do me a favor, smash that like button, share it with somebody who needs to hear that it's never over until you say it's over, and subscribe for more stories that remind us who we really are when the world tries to forget. Until next time, stay dangerous, stay free, and never, ever kneel. We'll see you in the next one.